Hello dear children, and welcome to the next semester. I shall be handling both your main paper for BA English as well as your general paper Zeitgeist. When we start our offline classes, I shall be handling Zeitgeist only for BA, and Zeitgeist shall be handled for BCom Finance, Corporation and BBA by Teresa Miss and Divya Miss. But for the online lessons, I shall be the one who will be handling Zeitgeist for all the 4 classes for online. Okay, so let's begin with the second module, that is, and that is the end of living and beginning of survival by Chief Seattle. Now, it's a very interesting document. In fact, this is in the form of a speech now, but it was actually a letter addressed to Sir Isaac, the then governor of Washington in US. Now, this letter is by a Native American chief Seattle, and the historians as well as the researchers are of the opinion that the present Seattle, the place in America, Seattle, has its name from this particular chief, or it is on his memory that then the very place Seattle is named. So let's get to the topic. Let's have an understanding of the setting and also the person who's here, Chief Seattle was, before we move on to the text. Another important thing that I want to tell you is there are several versions of this text. There are several translations. See, Chief Seattle wrote in Native American language, okay, and it was not written in English. This was translated by many writers. It was translated by many writers. It was also rewritten by several others, written and rewritten. So because of this, the authenticity, the originality of the text is somewhere lost. Some of the writers have begun, like for instance, if you look at your textbook, this is your textbook, okay, Zeitgeist. This is the text, and the module that we are handling is the second module. And if you look at the text, if you open to page, say, 30, you will find the translation. The one that you have to study is by Ted Percy. And you are also given for comparison another version of Chief Seattle's speech or Chief Seattle's letter, and that is by Henry A. Smith, and that's in fact the most famous version. Even ICSE has this particular text, 10th standard ICSE board. They have Chief Seattle's speech for their course of study, and they have used Henry A. Smith's version. Whereas for you, for the Calicut University, has prescribed Ted Percy's text. Okay, Ted Perry's. Ted Perry's text is being provided to you. Now, you are also requested to make a comparison of Henry A. Smith's translation with that of Ted Perry's. Now, again, we do not know the authenticity of any of these texts, because if you look at Henry A. Smith's writings, that is, if you turn to page number 34, the same text is by Henry A. Smith, translated by Henry A. Smith. And you will find that it is totally different from how Ted Perry has perceived it. So there is a lot of imagination also used by these writers in the text. So several versions, several translators have used or has written this differently. Okay, so what we have is Ted Perry. So don't think that you can write any, you can just Google and search the text of End of Living and Beginning of Survival. You will have to specify the name of the person, Ted Perry's version. Okay, what we are dealing with is Ted Perry's version. Alright, so I'll just give you a quick idea of what this is all about. I would request you to, it would be very quite monotonous and boring to read the whole text for the online session. So I want you students to turn to page 29 and read the text. Okay, so when soon after this video is done, after watching this video, you are to read the introduction. All right, don't forget to read the introduction, because most of the questions asked for your university exam comes from your text, from the introduction part. Most of them comes from the introduction part, and that's where you go wrong, because you do not read the introduction. You often skip the introduction. Don't do that, because you will get questions from the introduction part, especially small biographical details. So I would request you to read the text. So the indigenous people of America, they had great regard for nature, and they consider all of their environment to be their home. Nevertheless, in 1800s, the imperial government of America, you had imperialism, colonization. You had the French settlers, you had the Dutch settlers, you had the British settlers. Okay, so the imperial government of America, led by Sir Isaac L. Stevens, was determined to buy and retain a large portion of their land, the Native Americans, their land, so that they could expand the Washington territory. So the colonizers, just like what they did in India, they started buying large territories of land. So the exact thing that has happened to our Adivasis now, the same thing is, is what is portrayed here. The indigenous people, the native tribal people, they began to lose their land. And these settlers, the British settlers, we had the British settlers, we had the French settlers, we had the Dutch settlers, all were fighting for grabbing their land, making it a territory of their land. For themselves, and so many Native Americans were massacred. They were brutally killed. So all that is touched upon in this beautiful speech by Seattle. Actually, it's not a speech, okay. It is a letter which Chief Seattle wrote to Sir Isaac. Okay, so this chapter, the end of living and beginning of survival, this chapter is based, or is a letter, is actually a letter which Chief Seattle wrote to Sir Isaac. Okay, so Sir Isaac, under the leadership of Sir Isaac, the imperial government of America, under the leadership of Sir Isaac L. Stevens, they were planning to expand the territory, and they wanted to establish industries there, and they wanted to expand the Washington territory. Chief Seattle, who was a central hero of our chapter, who is Chief Seattle, who is the central hero of our chapter, the end of living, living and the beginning of survival, wrote an extensive letter addressed to the ruling party to reconsider the decision and to stop this expansion, because it would have adverse complications in the future which would result in environmental degradation. What has happened, what is happening, like when you expand a city, or when you go in for expansion of a territory, the forests are cleared. It leads to the death of all these trees, and the streams and the natural resources are all destructed or destroyed in order to give way to the expansion of the city. So that is, again, if you look at the text, you will find that it is all addressed very clearly. The deforestation, that mass deforestation that is going to happen to build industries there, will eventually lead to big catastrophe. And this was foreseen by Chief Seattle. And he is urging, pleading, requesting these government or these ruling party to reconsider the decision. Okay, and at present, this piece of literature has been of great value, and because if you look at the present situation that we are living, the environmental movement, and you will find that this letter has an immense prominence in today's life. It's like making us rethink of what we have been doing. It makes us sensitive to, or it sensitizes us to our environment. Chief Seattle's speech and plot, it is regarded as a very memorable and very prominent letter, then and even today, and perhaps even to the future to come. He is regarded as a great tribal leader, and he was a very wise man who could perceive the adverse effect of widespread capitalization and human greed upon nature, even in the 1800s. He was born into the tribes of both Duwamish and Suquamish tribes, that they are indigenous tribes or Native American tribes, and he gained popularity as a dynamic warrior from a very early age. He grew up respecting the land, respecting nature, his culture, and the forest, of course, the nature and forests around him. And he considered himself to be their protector, the protector of nature, the protector of his culture, the protector of his tradition. And he gained the respect of his people by avoiding bloodshed, unnecessary bloodshed, through legal diplomacy, and also made political friendships over time with the imperial parties, many of the imperial great ruling people. He made friendship with them, which helped him, or which always served him well. He always protected his people, and therefore he gained widespread popularity. He did not go in for unwanted, unnecessary wars. The tribes He did not force his tribes to follow the path of war. Instead, it was all very peaceful. And that is why he gained popularity among his own people. He avoided unnecessary bloodshed. In the year 1854, the Native American chief, that is Chief Seattle, he delivered this letter to Sir Isaac Stevens, and who was the then governor of Washington Territory. The contents of the letter are important because it has a very important message regarding the land treaty which was proposed, or which was proposed to the tribal chiefs earlier by Sir Isaac. And in that treaty, in that land treaty, it was always for the favor of the whites. They could occupy these territories and they could build factories and industries and townships there. So it was based on this that Chief Seattle writes a very important letter to Sir Isaac Stevens. Okay, it was all about this land treaty. Now, according to many researchers and critics, the letter, which is now taken as a speech, had the potential of a powerful request or a powerful plea, and it was written in regards to the respect of Native American land rights and their environmental values. Their values were considered to be sacred in their culture. To these people, they stood for values, and these values were sacred. They worshipped nature, like we also worship nature, right? In India also we worship our Ganga river. We worship the sun. We worship in some of the folk stories you have seen the trees are worshipped, especially the tree sal. The sal tree is worshipped as the Bhumi Devi rests inside the sal tree. That's how it says. The Bhumi Devi, or goddess of nature, rests inside the sal tree. That's what the Indian tradition or the Indian myth is all about. Or several, you have several such beliefs. Likewise, they also believed in nature. They worshipped, their culture was very sacred to them. And the white American government's move to acquire more and more land for industrial development was seen as a ploy to increase the government's political ruling of Native Americans. Slowly they were creeping in. ഒട്ടകത്തിന് സ്ഥലം കൊടുക്കുന്ന ഒരു ആറ്റിറ്റ്യൂഡ് എന്ന് കേട്ടിട്ടുണ്ടോ? അത് തന്നെയാണ് ഇവിടെ കാണുന്നത്. മെല്ലെ ഒന്നുകിൽ വോറിലൂടെ ബ്ലഡ് ഷെഡിലൂടെ അതവർ കോൺകർ ചെയ്യാൻ ശ്രമിക്കുന്നു, അല്ലാന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ കുറേ ഡിപ്ലോമാറ്റിക് ആയിട്ട് കോൺകർ ചെയ്യാൻ ശ്രമിക്കുന്നു. സോ ദിസ് ക്യാൻ ബി സീൻ ആസ് എ പ്ലോയ് ഫ്രം ദി ഗവൺമെൻറ്, ദ റൂളിംഗ് പാർട്ടീസ് സൈഡ്, to increase the government's political ruling of the Native Americans. Slowly they were going to be ruled upon. The Native Americans are going to lose their land and they are going to be ruled upon, like the same thing like as of the Adivasis. Okay, our Adivasis are suffering the same. Okay, the lands are taken away from them. All right, they had their culture is also very different, right? The Adivasi culture is also different. They have their own traditions, they have their own values, they value nature, they give prime importance, they live in harmony with nature, and their rules are totally different. It has no connection with the government rules. Their rules are different, right? But now what look at them, they have lost their forests, they have lost their land. Right, they have most of those forest areas are now acquired, are now under the control, completely under the control of the government, Indian government. So you will find that the problems, these problems in our Wayanad, the Adivasis of Kerala. Yes, you will find that in Assam and all those places. You have studied that in the BA English students may have studied about it in introducing literature. The Adivasi Will Not Dance by Hansda Saubendra Shekhar. Yes, you have studied that Adivasi Will Not Dance. You find how the government creeps upon and takes away their land, their religion, they are exploited. So likewise, this is also seen as a ploy from the government, the ruling party side, to rule the Native Americans. So to control this rising, or to control the rising unrest among his people starts to revolt, and unnecessary revolts may end up in bloodshed. So Chief Seattle wanted to he didn't want already they are outnumbered. Already these the fights between the Native Americans and the white settlers. The white settlers were with these crazy guns and weapons, and the Native Americans, they used arrows and traditional weapons. So they were being outnumbered by these settlers, white settlers. So they have lost many people, and Chief Seattle did not want any uprisings, or he did not want any bloodsheds. So in order to control the rising unrest among his people, and also to stop that move from the ruling party's side, from the white settlers' side, to make peace with the government, Chief Seattle wrote this famous speech with the hope of administering a public appeal to the governor. And who's the governor? Sir Isaac L. Stevens. Okay. Now, turn to your textbook. You have to read the text after this video. Okay, so I'll just give you a gist of the speech. Environmental degradation and its effects on the climate change were matters of deep concern to the Native Americans, and Chief Seattle, he begins his speech with a direct remark on this particular issue, the environmental degradation and its effect on climate change. This is what he brings in the beginning of his speech. He discusses at length the various negative impact it can have upon the human civilization, and how man can suffer if proper precautions are not taken. The speech also includes a few endearing tribal legends, and he talks, and his talks are based on Mother Nature, and how she has been a constant source of guidance and wisdom to all these people from the very beginning. Seattle points out all the aspects through which nature had sheltered the humans and provided sustenance to all living beings. So that's how Seattle begins his letter. Then you find that the text it takes a very dire turn, and the speaker, Chief Seattle, he admonishes the modern civilization for not showing due respect to nature and for ruthlessly exploiting the non-renewable resources. This is where he puts forward his opinions regarding the ecological responsibilities we all have towards nature. And here also he mentions that the Native American land rights, or he mentions the Native American land rights for which he was fighting with the imperial authorities. Then the text takes on a dire turn, and the speaker admonishes the modern civilization for not showing any respect to nature. This is where he puts forward his opinions regarding ecological responsibilities. In fact, when we read this text, we are also reminded of our ecological responsibilities, our responsibilities towards nature, what all small things we can do as responsible human beings, not citizens. I'm not speaking about citizens. I'll not be speaking about citizens as of India. I will be speaking about citizens as of citizens of the world. As human beings, we all share this world, this planet Earth, and we have our responsibilities towards the Earth to protect the Earth for future generation. Right? So we are also reminded of our ecological responsibilities. Not just that, through this, he speaks about all these. At the same time, he also brings in the most important thing that he wanted to talk or wanted to speak to the imperial authorities, and that is the Native American land rights that he has been fighting for. He has been fighting with the imperial authorities, for which he had always been fighting with the imperial authorities. Then the Native American land rights. So this is based on that land treaty, okay. And Chief Seattle, he pleaded with the dignity that the hostilities shown by the Native Americans should should end, and only if this hostility ends will they be able to live in peace and harmony. Both the Americans, the white settlers, as well as the Native American people, both hate each other. They cannot stand each other. Each one has their own reasons why they don't like each other. The white settler is greedy. They want to conquer the land. They consider the native people, the indigenous people, tribal, uncouth, savage people, and they have often gone to the extent of grave brutality. And the indigenous people, the Native Americans, they view them as enemies because they view them as traitors. They view them as monsters who have come to occupy their land, as people who are greedy. Again, yeah, they know what these people are fighting for, and therefore they are trying to protect their land, their people from the white settlers, and therefore they cannot stand each other. So Chief Seattle is urging and pleading both the sectors, because Chief Seattle had political or he had friends from in the imperial side also, and he being a chief of the Native American people, he was fighting for them. So he wanted to bring peace between the imperial ruling authority and the Native American people, so that they could live in harmony. Okay, so now turn to your textbook. So this is an inspiring speech delivered by Chief Seattle, a Native American leader, to a response made by the governor of the Washington Territory. He feels and argues that it is impossible to buy or sell natural resources like air, water, and land because we do not own them. They are God's gift to us. We do not own water, we do not own air, we do not own the land. So that is what their views and traditions are based on. They are a gift. He says that every part of the earth is sacred to him and also to his people. They are a part of the earth, and the earth is a part of them. Even the souls of the Native Americans do not leave their land. Instead, they make it their permanent residence. Unlike the belief system of Christianity, so he brings in Christianity also here. Unlike in the belief of the system of the mainstream religion that we go to heaven, their religion feels that they do not leave. They make a permanent residence in earth itself. They don't leave. Even if they are dead, even if they die, they are permanently here on earth. They become either a tree or a stream or a flowing river. So that's their kind of belief. Okay, in short, the earth is not an inanimate tract of land for them. It is a living, it is but a living presence. It is a living presence, and it is to be treated with love and care, respect and fear. But the world view of the white men is entirely different. For them, it is an object to be tamed. It is an object to be conquered and exploited to the full until it ceases to be useful. So that is the ruthlessness of the white man. For Native Americans, on the other hand, all natural phenomena are their own siblings, their own brothers and sisters. It is true that the governor, or here it is addressed as the president has promised to take care of them like a father. He has also promised to give them a special area where they can continue living with all their rites, rituals, and other cultural practices. But still, the sale is going to be difficult as the pangs of parting, the sadness, the pain of parting with such a dear and sacred place are excruciating, terrifying. Okay, the chief suggests some conditions. If at all the transaction takes place, the transaction of land, so the president has already promised them a different place where they can continue their rituals, they can continue their tradition. But it's going to be difficult for them because they are so used to the place. They consider every tree, every stream, every flowing river, every chirping bird, animals and bees as their own brothers and sisters, and to leave that and go to another place is terrifying for them. Okay, and if at all the transaction does take place, then Chief Seattle says that there are certain conditions. And the white man should remember that the land that they have taken from the Native Americans is sacred and inviolable. They should also teach their children the same, to respect nature. The chief wants white men to treat rivers and bees as their own brothers and not to be seen through a utilitarian perspective, to be used to the fullest, to give them happiness to the fullest, and to use them till they are polluted, till they are till they are dried. Okay, to use them and destroy them. No, that's not the way it should be. They should treat the rivers, they treat the animals as their own siblings, as their own brothers. They have seen the white men pollute rivers and shoot animals for the sake of fun. The reality is that every object in nature is connected to each other. Whatever happens to animals and land will also happen to us sooner or later. No one can escape this fate. The earth does not belong to us, but we belong to the earth. And all are bonded like family members. For his people, the din, frenzy, and chaos of modern cities are a painful sight. They're so used to living in harmony with nature, the simplicity of nature, the peacefulness of nature, that the modern cities, the hustle and bustle of the modern cities, the dim and frenzy and chaos of the modern city are very painful to them. For them, simple pleasures of nature are more precious and more important than anything else. They treat rain, wind, and land as living organisms, just like they treat human beings. Unfortunately, the white man has neither the sense nor the sensibility to feel the pulse of nature. He just considers nature as something that he can use and pollute and misuse. Chief Seattle, ironically and sarcastically also, adds that perhaps the problem is with himself and his people, because they are uneducated, they are illiterate, they are uncivilized. Maybe that is the reason that they are feeling like this. So it is a sarcastic comment. It is an ironic comment, because we know that Chief Seattle is right. It is not because he's uneducated. It is not because he's uncultured. It is not because he's uncivilized. But rather, he knows what it is to be a human being, which the civilized man, the so-called civilized white man, the so-called educated white man, the so-called cultured white man does not understand, or has failed to understand. So he adds it very ironically that maybe it is our fault. We don't know. We are uneducated. We are illiterate and uncivilized. Maybe that is why we consider all these things as our brothers and sisters, and we live in close harmony with nature. Maybe it is our fault. That's a very ironic and sarcastic comment. Okay. The holistic vision of the speech is reiterated at the end, reiterated, repeated, brought back, okay, at the end with a theological framework. There is only one God, and he does not discriminate between people. So there is a religious theological framework, and whatever statements he has, or this holistic vision that he had been speaking of, the nature as of being pure, giving respect, is brought back in a theological framework. And he said there's only one God, and God is not biased, is not prejudiced. He does not discriminate between people. White or red, human beings are equal in front of him. The earth is precious to him, and to harm the earth is to heap contempt on the Creator. And who's the Creator? God is the Creator. So if you are to harm the earth, what you're doing is you are harming the Creator. Destiny is the mystery to Native America too, but they do realize that changed environment marks the end of living and the beginning of survival. So they too believe in destiny, but a change of the environment, a total change in the environment, can result in a terrifying future. That's what we are also heading towards. We do not know what is going to happen to Earth. We do not know how we are going to survive. Now it's all to do with survival. Air is polluted. Water is polluted. There's pollution everywhere. What will happen to Earth in the next few decades, we cannot say. And how it would be for the future generation, we do not know. Okay, so we should not be unmindful of the duties that we are supposed to do as citizens of the world. Again I say, as citizens of the world, we all are entrusted with the duty of taking care of our environment. So Chief Seattle's speech is a very important and a very prominent one. So that's it for now. Thank you and keep safe.